Здравствуйте, дорогие коллеги. Сегодня мы будем рассказывать вам про использование.
Dear colleagues, hello. Today we're going to tell you about using AI in urban centers, cities. My name is Mikhail Shpak, and I'm the head of technological consulting department Huawei, Russia. And today I'm going to tell you about using AI in smart cities. This subject is quite important, interesting. And this is the point that actually changes our lives, the lives of the users, municipalities, and of the country. All of the development trends, innovation technologies, and their usage will be briefly reviewed throughout our session. Now, before we move on to the technical part, I'd like to tell you that in terms of AI, a large number of countries had developed their own national strategies. Today, this is about 60 countries, including our country. We're implementing our own national strategy. I would call it an idea more than a strategy, since the idea allows us to take this flag and carry it forward. However, the strategy will be an auxiliary element for this idea. We can see that today the growth of the AI industry averages 30% annually, with a total volume expected by 2025 up to $7 trillion. Huge, impressive numbers. And the world is developing intricately along this vector. But let us look at the status today. We are now at the average maturity stage, so to speak. Now, the methods of using AI are a type of black box of sorts. And the community treats this type of technologies somewhat warily. According to our internal reports and also IDC reports, AI will be demanded in 97% of enterprises by the end of 25. This is actually very interesting, since the methods that are used by AI are used uniformly in retail, in government governance, in the banking sector. Large volumes of big data are very difficult to process using classical or outdated approaches. Today, we're looking at this up curve, that very little time remains until full implementation of AI into all the spheres of our lives. This will optimize the processes and, of course, provide facilitation for innovation landscapes. But to enter this landscape, we have to clearly understand the changing landscape of the industries. Which industries will be transformed by these disruptive technologies? If we look at Huawei's general experience, over the last 10 years, we have constructed over 600 projects related to smart cities. And throughout this project framework, we learned that approximately 30% of the core service subsystems are already using AI. This is very interesting. This is managing a smart city, learning operations related to lifestyle issues, water, traffic, and also security for oil and gas sector, crowd control, crowded facilities such as airport, mass transit facilities. AI provides for revolutionary scenarios. Now, there is a huge gap between digitalization and digital transformation. Digitalization is a process owing to which the digital becomes an auxiliary supporting elements. Digital transformation is equality growth and quality changes. It can be termed the next industrial revolution. This growth is observed in the as in the shift from lighting fire with flints or phase related to coal or electric power, and now we're in the era of data. In this data era, data rules the world, and AI provides for processing capability, which is not just a pressing, timely challenge, but a need, a necessity, which will allow for this industrial transformation. Now, what does the average scenario look, median scenario looks like in terms of smart city AI? If speaking of a city or a country, we are facing standard challenges. For instance, working in urban environment, working with road surfaces, and generally quality of life. Using the existing systems of CCTV will allow us to conduct certain process identification of such scenarios, and not only identify such scenarios, but also build run-through processes. Today, for instance, a lot of processes are performed manually. For instance, you log on onto a government website, for instance, the Do Gooda, and you enter your information, it is processed and then transferred. For you, this process of your information being used is a black box. Now, in the case of using AI, similar to CCTV networks, and also working with the citizens and creating such run-through processes, we are able to advance the city much further and do more for the city. Now, speaking of the mechanisms related to natural speech processing, and for instance, we are creating a pass-through confirmation through CCTV cameras, we can collect some interesting scenarios. These scenarios are now being implemented also in Chinese cities. Another interesting scenario that should be reviewed is the scenario of Shanghai. As you're aware, Shanghai is located quite close to large water bodies. Previously, during typhoon season, flooding was always a risk. The city has gone through digitalization, using the mechanisms discussed at previous slides, and using this proactive analytics, had developed the risk models. Now, as soon as there is a threat of flooding for certain areas, the run-through process exists as a solution for resolving as a solution to this problem. It can result in the launch of mechanical processes such as pumping stations or additional emergency crews assigned. As a result of these actions, we are seeing a serious reduction in flooding. It is really quite significant when we are watching the news and the pictures of floods in Moscow look quite apocalyptical. However, here, the use of these formats will allow us to seriously reduce these risks. And even if you mitigate these risks, you are still going to see additional scenario which will go into further. This is managing the road traffic network. Accordingly, using smart city lights system, you are able to send the driver to detour and prevent a traffic collapse. Now, all of these types of scenarios have to be built on proactive open platforms within the framework of partnerships with Sberbank on SberCloud. The first pilot cases of such scenario implementation are used. Huawei Smart Campus solution. These scenarios are related to data management, for instance, healthcare monitoring, or for instance, monitoring the wearing masks. And all of this can provide for new use cases in terms of efficiency. Today, if we digitalize your median enterprise, your energy efficiency can be seriously reduced. Now, let me provide you an example, case in point of our research institute in Shanghai. After digitalization, installing sensors, understanding that people are present, and the sensors, when detecting people living, will send the building and the room into energy-saving mode, turning off aircon and heating. Also, security is another scenario, location of people during fires or any other natural catastrophe, natural disaster. All of these scenarios use AI, machine learning, speech processing, and correlation of complicated graphic scenarios. Also, these scenarios are focused on improving the quality of life on campus and also in public places. This scenario mentioned earlier is optimizing traffic. Tianjin Echo City optimized signal timing to accelerate traffic using Traffic Go system. The chain of CCTV, smart city lights network analyze traffic and allow for serious reduction in traffic congestion and other incidents on the roads related to non-optimal traffic flows related to the traffic lights work, and also is able to call emergency services such as ambulances or police to respond in an emergency. These scenarios are quite interesting in terms of new interactions between services. The OpenIP platform allows us to integrate the necessary information for various municipalities and various services, depending on consumption peak times. For instance, something that works for the police won't work for the ambulance. And here, the driver for development is the open platforms. Now, to move on to more interesting scenarios related to control and management, because the subject of ESG agenda is one of the key vectors of this conference. We can't avoid mentioning that. Smart Suzhou is an eastern city in China. Over 42% of city's surface is covered in lakes and rivers. So the city hall is facing serious scenarios related to quality of life and water logging. First of all, this is marine weed, algae contamination, and certainly quality of water is a concern. Using AI for recognizing and prediction and other technological process automation can provide for better quality of life. It's always nicer to look at a clean river does not having any additional and superficial elements. This certainly makes the urban spaces environments more attractive.
And such scenario seriously improved the quality of life in the city. Continuing following the agenda of ESG, control for energy consumption and setting up a power model for Harbin. Harbin is a large city, and we monitor the models of energy consumption. For instance, probably the model for buildings is not very efficient, and heat visioning shows that you have leaks of heat in some areas. And so such approaches balance energy efficiency and reduce operational costs for heating and setting up a proper environment where you control temperature you need for life. Because sometimes human bodies function effectively enough in certain temperature range. When it goes up or down, quality of life is going down, is dropping. Such predictive model allows us to predict consumption and reduce the costs dramatically. And nice scenarios. Sichuan is one of very beautiful places where pandas live, pandas and other animals. And monitoring of scenarios related to fire, security and safety, and some other risks with disruptive technologies, technologies that change the format of operations, Internet of Things technologies and 5G technologies and utilization of drones and artificial intelligence keeps this place safe and environmentally friendly. The risks that can emerge in natural environment. Equipment installed will not be interfering lives of animals, and they continue living in their natural habitat with high quality of life standard, and people can enjoy beautiful pictures from such natural sanctuaries. Closing my session, I would like to show you the following conclusions. Of course, implementing such scenarios for safety of protection of confidential and personal data is one of the key elements for such solutions. Number two, of course, we need to monitor and consider digital inclusivity. Such solutions should work for people. Their lives should improve, and such technologies should be perceived by the society. So for it not to make three different sides, rival sides, people, cities, and technologies. But these things should improve our lives, and things my colleagues plan to speak about machine learning, actually aim at the same purposes.